Good morning. Morning,
Good morning.
everyone.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Sorry to keep you all waiting. I could not log in this morning. It was very strange. And then I thought to myself, what exactly does the teacher do if he can't get into his own meeting? So really, if it took 2 minutes more, I was going to send everyone one of these alert announcements. I'm not even sure that everyone checks their email that often, but weird. I don't know. I imagine we all do it differently. I use the sign in with Google option. So the problem could have been at Zoom, could have been at Google. I have no idea. But all of a sudden I got it to work, so I'm pleased. How is everybody today?
Good.
Okay.
All right. All right, folks. So let me tell you, I'm hoping a lot of you got my last email. I sent out a group email. There was nothing urgent in there. It was really those of you who are have schedules such that I see you in class. I really didn't need that. It was just to let everybody else know who may have a more unusual schedule taking this class remotely, what this last week's going to be like and how important it is being the last week. So I do see a bunch of names here that don't generally come to class physically. So welcome, and welcome all the regulars. Let me, oops, hang on a second there. It's a little discombobulating, when you expect to be able to sign in and can't. I know I've had students that's had connection issues before class, but that was a first for me. All right, I want to switch right to screen sharing so that we could use these last 4 days as wisely as possible. So let me switch on over there. We can take a look at the handout together. I'm choosing the desktop option as I always do. And here we are. I want to just get to today's handout. Boy, that menu's gotten long. All right. So let's go over a couple of things, right? I want to make sure that everybody here and everyone who's going to watch this video later tonight, that they feel, rather stable about what the last few days are, what the requirements are, right? So this Thursday is our very last day, period, right? I only get 48 hours to deal with grades at the end of a class. So there's not going to be any late work accepted. And the final deadline is Saturday, which happens to be Independence Day. So if you have some way of celebrating, then please get whatever you need done before then, right? I could have easily had the deadline on Thursday or Friday, but I chose to stretch it out as far as I can get away with. So the deadline is on Saturday the 4th, right? And that deadline includes everything you see on this list, right? The last of which we haven't talked about yet. So I want to point out that, those of you who've gotten really friendly with me, I want to say in advance, nothing serious, but I've been ill for a few days. I'm better today. I do not have COVID. I don't think I have it, but I've been sick. So I haven't really been able to catch up on anything. So my goal today is to try to catch up on grading all the homework that's been handed in. That's my plan. All right. So if you've missed any of these three, get busy right away. Don't give me everything on the last day and expect a decent, expect the best grade, right? But if you're behind on something, don't worry about it. Just get it to me by the deadline. The first two homeworks were way overdue, and I really shouldn't be accepting midterms this late in the semester. But I'm going to keep an open mind because there's been extraordinary circumstances nowadays. The class 15 video assignment was due last Thursday, so it's only a bit late, and that has not yet been graded at all. I want to focus today, though, on the very last assignment, the only animation assignment. And today, we're going to simulate it. We're going to do an assignment just like the final assignment. We're going to do that together. But before I do that, I want to go a little bit further. Now, hang on one second here. Well, let me just tell you. So today we're learning essentially updated skills. The last time I saw you, we'd moved through the animation techniques to classic tweening. So we began with frame by frame, which we're not going over. We continued with shape tweening, which is not amongst the most important, but it was a great way to introduce the idea of tweening. And then we moved into the very powerful classic tweening. So we did frame by frame, shape tweening, classic tweening. Now, all the ones that end with tweening, all the techniques that end with the word tweening, means that you're setting up important key moments, keyframes, but the computer takes care of the middle part. You know, so it's things that simply move from one place to another place really don't need me to frame by frame where this thing's going to be. So I have a first keyframe. I establish how long I want it to take. And if I want that to take a whole second, on frame 24, I move the artwork here. That's a whole second, 24 frames. And then I ask the computer to tween it. So that's in the newest flavor. And indeed, we are going to continue with classic tweening today. So we're going to go over some basics, but quickly, we want to move into type, text. Kinetic type or kinetic text is a common phrase you hear around the motion graphics community. Kinetic is the key word there, K-I-N-E-T-I-C, and it's worth looking up on YouTube. Kinetic type, kinetic text, they're very entertaining and a big part of motion. So I want to get to that today. I want to tell you some good news first, kind of extraordinary good news. It doesn't affect this class directly, but it does affect some of you as individuals. Adobe has generously extended the Creative Cloud subscriptions you all got for a substantial time, nearly 2 additional months, nearly at least a month and a half. So it now ends at August 24th, which is incredibly cool. So I know some of you have really been taking this class very personally and have every intention of continuing a number of these skills. So all the Adobe related ones, which to be specific is Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, and now Adobe Animate, they're all part of Creative Cloud, so that you have all the way to August 24th to continue without paying for it. That's pretty slick. I don't believe you have to do anything if you're already subscribed. It's just going to last. So that's pretty cool. Guys, again, please don't be shy about interrupting me. The class is typically very quiet. You just turn on your mic if you want to point something out or ask something, right? Okay, so that's good news, everybody. I hope everyone's hearing me out on that. You got an extension on your free CC subscription, August 24th. Fabulous. So we're going to review classic tweening, and I'm going to make it a kind of quick review because we essentially going to review it yet again when we get to doing kinetic type today. So let me show you something. I gave you a peek last week at some kinetic type, but I want to show you something kind of quickly. So give me a moment here. Let me put this aside for a sec. I'm not sure I'm going to need it right away. All right, let's see now. I'd like you to take a look at this. So what you're looking on my screen is a sample of what we're going to do today. We're going to be using this exact same quote today, right? And it's very, very short. It's a 4-word quote. So that's significantly easier to deal with than a 100-word quote. I included the name of the author, Walt Whitman. It says, "Peace is always beautiful." I want you to take a look at my timeline with me. So this color means classic tween, right? So you could see that I've got 4 layers and each one's got a classic tween. Now I'd like you to look hard, right? Because it really, even following my instructions, it isn't going to feel right. You're not going to feel confident until you get some ideas with me. So if you look at it, there's 4 layers. The top one's called Peace. The second layer is called Is Always. The next layer is called Beautiful, and the last Walt Whitman. So you can see exactly what I did, right? I divided the layers into 4 lines. Now, if you look at those lines, they all have that same color, which means they've all been classic tweened, right? And everywhere you see 2 keyframes, that represents a movement. So let's look at the piece layer for a minute. In frame 1, I don't even see the word piece, even though there's a keyframe there, a black one. But if I scroll over, you see the word piece is coming from the top, and it's also fading in. So that word used two different properties, right? One is just location, which is most of what we expect in animation. Things are going from one place to another. So location change. But the other one is transparency. In this program, we call that alpha. So if I say alpha, I just mean transparency, right? So it's starting at 0 alpha. And by the way, I see some of you take notes. The other common word is opacity. That's probably the most common word for this. Photoshop calls it opacity. This program calls it alpha. So I've got 0 alpha, and as the thing comes down, it moves into 100% alpha. Now, if you look closely, you could see, as soon as that one landed, you could see the next line starting to rev itself up. It's at a very low alpha, so you barely see it. And that one's not coming from the top, it's coming from the right. So it also faded in. Now you can see what my plan is, and this is what we're going to do together today. As soon as is always arrives, and I'm going to be using that phrase a lot, it arrives. That means this is where it meant to go. Came from wherever, but now it's arrived. As soon as these two words arrive, you could see the next line starts to come in, and it's coming from the opposite side. Let me just make a little room here. So it's coming in. He's always beautiful. Now I decided that the last line would delay a little bit. So there's a little pause. We don't see the name of the author anywhere. It actually waits a little bit, maybe about a half a second, and then Walt Whitman doesn't even slide. It just shows up and fades in. Oh, it slides a little bit and fades in. Now, one couple things I want you to look hard at before we go into doing it together, which is always my favorite part. I want you to notice a few things about this very small timeline. One, they all end in exactly the same place. I think it was John who asked me last week, like, is there anything I could do because some of my elements seem to disappear? And after he asked that, we went to each layer and extended them so that they end on the same plot. I want to show you what would happen if that wasn't true. Let's say all the layers ended here, except for the top one. Now you can already see the word piece is left out. So what's going to happen is when they all do the same animation you saw, let me just make this a little bit easier to see. It looks like everything's good, and all of a sudden the word piece disappears. It disappeared here because this layer is not the same length as its partners. So by the way, I'm not saying that's always wrong. You know, what if that word had left the stage already? No one would know if it was there or not. No one would care. But since it's on stage, it's rather strange to have it disappear. And that's all because it wasn't the same length. So we're going to be using F5 today and F6, which have different purposes. And I'm going to be very clear about the difference. But F5 means give me more time. Extend my animation or extend my layer in this case. So I just extended it again. And so now it will no longer disappear. All right, now I know some people are just waking up, and I know if I was younger, I might be staying up late nowadays, right? So that's all right, but just notice a couple more things with me before we move in. All this gray area is empty. So the layer called piece obviously starts the show, and it got 20 frames. 20 frames to arrive. Then the word is always appears, and it got, here it is, right? And it has another 20 frames to arrive. That was an arbitrary choice, but I like the timing. And it's easy to remember. I'm going by 20s. The word beautiful shows up, barely, and it also gets 20 frames. So by and large, I gave each layer 20 frames. Some of them show up late. Only one showed up at the beginning. Before I move forward, does anyone have any preliminary questions for me about this? All right, let's jump in together then. All right, I'm going to put this aside. So I'd like you to open Animate. And once you're in Animate, let's go straight to the File menu. File menu, New. This we've done a whole bunch of times, right? So you could ignore these and just come to the right and copy what you see here. I want the width to be 640. That's always pixels. Height 480. Frame rate's 24. So that's not 2400, that's just 24. And the platform's ActionScript 3. Let's click Create. All right. Now, I think I'd like to begin with a very short warm-up just about classic tweening. Now, I want to say something to be ultra inspiring, or rather, let me be practical, ultra specific. Tomorrow, we actually start the final. So I want everybody to hear me out exactly what I'm trying to say. Tomorrow, we start it being, I go over the steps, I go into all the details. Tomorrow is the introduction of the final. Frankly, some of you are going to get this down today, right? And you're going to probably race through that final without me. But here's the idea. Today's the ideas, some warm-up. Tomorrow we begin the final. That's Tuesday. Wednesday we continue the final. I'm seeing that currently as an assisted lab, meaning by Wednesday you should be somewhat independent. But those of you who want to will work around me in our Zoom world, so you could ask questions as they come up. We did that on the midterm. So today's all the techniques you need. Tomorrow, it's applied directly to the final, and the other day's an assisted lab. What about Thursday, right? By then, I am done with the type. That will have given us 3 days on this topic. That's over. Thursday, I'm going to include the last topic, which is an easy one and has no homework. That's going to be our last day. One new topic just to get introduced to something else, right? The final could be handed in anytime after tomorrow between Tuesday and Saturday. You got a long window. Some of you will have it in same day. Some will wait, right? So the due date for everything is Saturday. It's going to go into the same Dropbox we've been using. Does anybody have any questions about the next few days? Very focused on the final, really, except for Thursday. We're going to do something else. All right, quiet morning today. Let's dive in. I want to do a quick reminder of basic classic tween steps, and then we're going to move right into text together, kinetic text, right? So these are the basic steps just for classic tweening. But guys, I want to tell you, it's not as obvious as frame by frame, though it's faster. It's not as obvious as shape tweening, though it's far superior. So let's warm up a bit. All right. Could everybody join me by putting a rectangle in the top left corner? So the first step, of course, is to get the rectangle tool and to make sure you're not getting this similar tool called rectangle primitive. Plain old rectangle tool. You could just tap R on your keyboard if you want to get there fast. Then I'd like you to choose a fill color for it. Any color will do. If you choose to use a stroke, just remember, it just takes a little bit more thought. The outline color is called a stroke. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to ask you to put a rectangle here. Step 1, create the artwork. We just did that. Step 2, right? Now here's where it gets important. Step 2 is use convert to symbol. Now I want to remind you, convert to symbol is going to take this artwork, freeze dry it, treat it as a permanent object that we can animate all over, but it's not going to change shape ever again, right? Permanent object, right? And it's going to live in the library, which is currently empty. All right, step 1, create the artwork. Step 2, select the artwork. So get your black arrow and select it. If you've got a stroke, please double click. Does anybody remember how to do convert to library? You can just shout it out.
Right click?
Right click it. So select the artwork and right click it. or control click it. Right? So, you know, I want to say something to everybody in here, especially those of you who've been enjoying animation with me. Very often you're going to right click or control click. The main question is, do I do it to the art on the stage or the keyframe in the timeline? Because it really depends on what you're doing. It's either the artwork or the timeline. We're going to be doing both. All right, so you created the artwork, you selected the artwork, and now you control click or right click. Right? Now you want this. Go right down to convert to symbol. So I hope you didn't move ahead without me. If you did, you're probably going to get away with it. We'll find out. So you go right down to convert to symbol. You give it a name. I'm going to call mine rectangle. And just take a quick look. Please leave this at graphic. Click OK. I'd like you to take a look in the library. And there it is in the library. Guys, I want to mention something. That's a whole step. Create the artwork, create the symbol. Now I'm going to actually throw mine out because I want to just make sure people are following me, right? So I'm going to delete mine. I'm even going to delete it from the library. Click it once, and there's a little trash can at the bottom. All right, so if you did yours perfectly, then just wait for a moment, okay? So I put it up here, create the artwork, select the artwork, right click or control click, and choose convert to symbol. This part's obvious. Give it a name and click OK. Easy, right? Now, the next essential step is to turn on the classic tween. Now, that's done from the timeline. So I remember when I learned this, it took me a while to get the hang of what happens on stage and what happens in the timeline. Well, most things that are about the artwork happen on stage, like making a symbol. Things that are about timing and movement usually take place in the timeline. All right, step 3 then. Go to the timeline and find your keyframe. And again, right click it or control click it. So find the keyframe, it should be black, control click it. Choose create classic tween. That was step 3. So in other words, you put it in the library before you start tweening. All right, the next step really has some leeway. People go in different order. What I'm going to be promoting today, and as I did last week, is establishing how long you think the layer ought to be. So you could change that timing later, but it's good to start with a reasonable guess, right? So I'm going to ask everybody to join me by stretching this timeline out to frame 60. Now, F5 is just time. So let's talk about F5 a little. You go to frame 60, and if all you want to do is stretch the timing out, you use your F5 key. Now, you might remember last week, most of us had to use FN on our laptops to make the F5 key work. Some people had different specific needs about how to set that up. I hope everybody's in control of it. You see that the line is 60 frames long. Anybody need me yet? You could just turn on your mic, shout it out. You make sure that my text is open, my chat, I should say. All right. So now we're ready to animate, right? Like that was all kind of like engineering. You know, we got everything in line. We're ready to animate this thing. So let's do it kind of quickly. I want to get to the text today. So your animation thinks it's going to take about 2.5 frames. Can you get the playhead back to the beginning? So here's the idea. Frame 1, that car is parked in the driveway, right? We're ready for it to move. I want it to hit the right corner by frame 15. So all you do is drag the playhead over to frame 15, right? You're telling it when. This is a when type of question. And then you drag that object over to the right corner. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going by 15 frames until we make a round trip following the wall, then following the floor, coming back up to the ceiling. So frame 1 was in the corner. Frame 15 is in the right corner. I want frame 30 to have it down here. So next step, bring the playhead over to frame 30 and drag the object to the bottom. So since I'm going by 15s, you should be able to guess what I'm about to do, right? I'm going to go to frame 45, and then I'm going to tell this thing to arrive in the left. How you doing, Andy? All right, okay. I'm attempting my Zoom telepathy. Sometimes I get it wrong. All right, so let's go to frame 45. And then drag it to the left. All we need to do is bring it on home in frame 60. So we're going over to frame 60. And then bring it up. Now we're not actually done, but we sure can test it. If you bring your playhead back to the beginning, you should be able to hit return or enter on your keyboard and see it. I want to say a few things though before we expand on what we have. Now, let's say yours isn't quite working right now. Here's a few things that you should check. One, have a peek in the library and make sure the object is there. So if you forgot where the library is, usually it's next to your properties palette, usually. But you could always get it from the window menu. Just do window menu, find the library, and you could open it from here. Same thing goes for the properties palette. So first you check. Now, if you've got 2 or 3 objects in there, you did something wrong, right? It might not have affected you, but it wasn't quite right. If you've got nothing in there, then none of this can work. Here's the next thing that you should check. You go to your timeline and you check your keyframes. And what you do is you click the first keyframe to see where the object lives. Remember, the keyframes are the black dots. Then you go to your next keyframe to see if the object's where you expected it to go next. And you go keyframe by keyframe to see if it's matching your intention. I'm going to go to the next one, hoping it's in the bottom right. You could move these. If this was in the wrong place, like this, let's say, I just broke mine. This is the way my animation's going to look. Uh-oh, that doesn't look right. So all I would do if I had that is I'd go back to the beginning and I'd check. Okay, that one's right. This one's right. Ooh, that one's wrong. And I'll just drag it into place. And I fixed it. Okay. What else? You know, so what we just did was we avoided a lot of F6ing. Now, we could have F6'd each time we wanted to move the object. And it just so happens classic Tween does that for you. F6 means copy the last keyframe so that I could move that artwork around. But we didn't need to do it. And once we saw that purple layer, we knew it was classic Tweened. All I had to do was drag the playhead to a moment and then tell my artwork where it should be. Let's take advantage of that. So this is what I'd like you to do with me. Get yourself back to the beginning. What I want, instead of a smooth slide, is I want it to come in a little bit from each side. And this is what I mean. You could do the first one with me. I'd like you to bring your playhead till that object's halfway across the screen, right? Its first destination was here. So I'm bringing the playhead till it's halfway there. Now, instead of it going straight, I want it to come down. There's no keyframe here, but if I drag it down a little bit, it makes the keyframe for me. So now my animation does this instead. Did you see it? If that was too subtle, I'll go back, bring it a little further then. I wanted to do the same thing while it goes down the right wall. So if you feel like you know how to do that, you go ahead. If you feel like you don't know how to do that, just join me. So I'm going to find where that sequence starts, or that segment starts. And I bring my playhead to the beginning. This is the end of it. And I see, okay, that's where it slides. But what I wanted to do, again, is in the halfway, once it reaches halfway down, I want it to what I'm calling a pucker. You know, I'm going to pull it in. The frame before still in the corner, upper corner. The frame after still in the lower corner. But now in the middle, it's here. So if I play this animation now, it's much more interesting. Do you think you could do the bottom? If you're feeling confident, please do the bottom. I'm going to do it in a minute, but I want to give people a minute first. So instead of it sliding, I'm looking for it to come up a little bit and then reach its destination. So this is the slide, but about halfway across is where my changes ought to be. And I bring it up. Listen, those of you who've got your cameras on or who are, you know, like using emojis, how many of you got that bottom part by yourself? All right, cool.
Yes.
Excellent. So I just want to say, you know, I don't know if this struck you as easy all along or hard, then a little easier, you know, exactly how you're going to rate this on the difficulty-ometer. Oh, big drag. Oh, too easy. Are we in the sweet spot? I don't know. I hope so, right? So I'm going to do the last wall. So I've got this thing doing its little leap, but the last wall's still straight up. And if I wanted that to change, I'll go halfway and let Animate make a keyframe for me as I drag it over. So I've got the whole animation. All right. Now, guys, I'm going to go very quickly with these next steps. I want to go over properties. Now, when I say properties, these are the properties that make the visual world. So what I'm talking about is tint. You know, for now, we could just think about that as color. Alpha, again, how transparent is it? Tint and alpha. In the real world, I'd call it orientation, but I'm going to call it here rotation. Is the object always upright? That's like weird. Even humans are not always upright, right? So orientation and scale. How big is it? Let's take on a few of these. Well, I'd like for you to choose a keyframe where this object should get really large. And I'm going to choose this one in the corner. Once you've chosen a moment, and this has to be over a keyframe, select the artwork. So first choose your keyframe, then choose the artwork by clicking it. And we need this tool. We're going to use this tool a bunch today called the Free Transform tool. If you can't find that tool, right, you're probably in the wrong workspace. Here's my window menu. Here's workspaces. The two that have worked for us is small screen and essentials. These others are not really going to work too well for us. I'm using essentials. Oops. Sorry about that. There we go. All right, once you've chosen the keyframe, clicked on the artwork only once, we got the Free Transform tool. Make it huge. I want to point out that this might be a nice time to rotate it a little. So I just zoomed out a bit. I'm in the same tool, the Free Transform tool, and I'm going to ask you to rotate it a little. So if you scaled that thing up and rotated it, you could rewind at any point to play it. All right, a little bit of a little jazz going on there. little bit of a surprise. I want to do some transparency. As I said, in this program, we call that alpha. So I want you to choose a keyframe. And you notice I keep coming back to the layer to make sure that I'm getting to know my own keyframes. I'm going to have it pretty much disappear in this corner. Now you could choose a different keyframe if you like. All right, these are the steps for transparency. Find the keyframe, click the artwork once, be careful not to double click it. Click the artwork once, and then find your properties palette. The properties palette has this color effect area, which we've used last week for two things, alpha and tint. It's rather hard to use them both, so I'd like to start right now with, what did I say we were going to work on? Transparency. So let's go to alpha. So you do have to click the artwork once, choose the keyframe, choose the artwork, and go to alpha. From there, it's pretty obvious. You can go down to 0 or just semi-transparent. I'm going all the way down. I'm on frame 30. It'll be easy for me to find my way back, but I am going to rewind and play it. That alpha didn't last long, but I want to keep it because we don't have much time. Could you find the keyframe where it's in the left corner? Remember, just the black dots are keyframes. I want to tint that one. If you remember how to tint, you go right ahead and tint it yourself. If you don't, it's the same steps as alpha, almost. So here are those steps. Find the keyframe, because that's how you find the time right now. So this is my keyframe where it's in the lower left. Then you click the artwork once. You really have to do that. And then it's back to the same place on the properties palette, color effect. You don't really want, you want to go right, not to alpha, you want to go to tint. The steps are the same, except for you choose tint. To change tint, there's two easy steps once you're here. Click the box and pick a new color, and then use this slider to say how much of that color. So here's red, and my greenish box gets sort of brownish when I mix it with red. But if I mix it with a lot of red, it's leaving the original color behind completely. All right, I'm going to click inside, rewind, and play. I want to ask everybody a serious question. If you want to ask me anything about those steps at this moment, the time is perfect. We're going to be using 4 layers in a few minutes, so it's going to be a little harder, and we're going to be doing some typography. We have enough time to do it thoroughly, so you may have your questions answered as we work, but please don't be shy. You know, I know some of you never say a word. I wonder if you're like that in the classroom too. You're entitled. You may just get everything. I don't know. Or maybe you just like to stay invisible, anonymous, turn your own alpha down to 0. Anybody have any questions for me? Shoot, Lorenzo.
Professor, what,
Give me 1 second there.
I can't see my options on the right there. I can't
Can you say that one more time?
I can't see my options on the right, like you had the
I
alpha.
want to show you why. First off, let me ask you, is your properties palette out?
Yes.
All right, so I want to show you guys something. Watch this. Let's say I wanted to change alpha on this one. Now I click the keyframe and it looks like it's selected, but I'm not seeing the options on the right. Why? Because I was fooled by it looking selected. I do have to click it once. Now the option showed up. So I think it's a fair bet that's what happened to you and will happen to many people in the class. So I'm going to repeat it again. You see, if you go to a keyframe, you could tell that you don't have the right properties. But if you click the keyframe, it looks correct, except for that Where is my color effects? You never see color effects unless you click the artwork once. Then they show up. Lorenzo, did that help?
Yes, it did help.
But there's something else.
Yes, it did.
Excellent. So guys, that was an excellent, excellent question because it's almost sure to happen to everyone. Because seriously, that looks selected, but it isn't the way the program thinks. It thinks you're working on time because this is where I clicked. I have to click on the artwork for it to tell me anything about the artwork.
I got a question real quick.
Sure, John.
What's the difference between the color effects when you click the keyframe and the color effects when you click the actual object?
Well, there are no color effects when you click the keyframe. Watch mine.
Yeah,
Right
when
now, look, I'm clicking the keyframe,
Mhm.
and there's no color effects.
There's a scroll bar for me, and I can scroll down and it says color effects.
Let me try. Interesting. So that's new. Give me a check. Give me a second. So you know what's very odd about it? I thought, oh, great, this just got easier. But I'm at 100% tint now, and it's still, let's see, that's because I wanted alpha. Oh, see, the thing is that's not 100%. There's something going on that's wrong here. You know what, I want to say something to you, John. That's new, right? In the past, you had to click the artwork. And even now it makes me nervous because I just asked it to be 100% alpha, and it's not.
Mhm.
What that means, I would be wild guessing. So I'm going to back up to the traditional method. That's a very good point that I have to look into. So for now, I think to play it safe, let's stick with the traditional method, which I'm going to repeat just one last time for anyone who got confused. You pick the keyframe to choose the time when you want that change. By the way, notice the suspicious white dot on that last one. I have to look that up. That's all new. I started using this program 20 years ago. So I'm a little surprised. Hope it's a good thing. Anyway, I'm going to click over here to choose the time. And as soon as I click the artwork once, it opened up a different palette without me scrolling. What the difference is, I'm interested in. But this is the safest way. I could choose tint or alpha. Does anyone else have any questions right now? You know, I want to move into type then, but I want to say something to you that's, you know, it's not negative, it's just challenging. So these programs change substantially a minimum of once a year, maybe twice. And there's little changes along the way. And Adobe doesn't document everything right away. So usually folks like me, we complain when a new version comes out. What is this? Oh no. And then in a few months, we're all in love with it. Boy, that was a great change. So I'm not going to put down any changes we bump into now. The version we're using is just a few weeks old. You know, so this would never happen at schools. Schools don't really ever use anything under 6 months old, in my experience. So I don't know what to expect in the fall. I hope they update everything. But so it goes. Guys, just give me 1 second. There's a bunch of urgent matters. I have to keep my eye on something. Live. Okay, let's start talking about kinetic type. So I want to say something about what we just did. One object giving us a chance to talk about properties, but obviously animators are always juggling objects. And often what they'll talk about is primary actions and secondary actions. So we've only had one thing. So that subject's not so interesting. Let's move forward together. All right, guys. Take a deep breath. We're going to try something new, kind of very interesting. This is going to be a very close simulation to the actual final project, which we will do again tomorrow. So you should be very, very prepared. All right, let me put this aside, and I want to show you something quickly before we do it together. Let's give me a moment. So we just went over classic tween concepts. Make your artwork a graphic symbol right away. Right, we used convert to symbol. Then turn the classic tween on from the timeline. It says pick your first frame. Turn it on, make classic tween. We just did a bunch of properties on the properties palette. We did tint and alpha today, but we did some manual rotation and scale. We left out brightness because it's the least exciting. Right. And it says here to click the instance on the stage. Yeah, even though this version looks like it's got some variations on that, I'm going to stick with these ideas. Right now, we're going to take those ideas and we're going to apply them to kinetic type for the first time. And this is our quote: "Peace is always beautiful," Walt Whitman. Now, before we get busy with that, I want to say a couple of ideas, and I'm really hoping I have your full attention. One, I'm going to lay this out first like a graphic designer. Now, what's the difference between a motion designer or a multimedia artist, let's say, and a graphic designer? Graphic designers don't use time. So you meet someone and they describe themselves as a graphic designer. Okay, they don't use time. So that means they're making posters. I guess a magazine is a sort of time, but not in the way we're thinking. That's also graphic design. So we're going to treat this almost like a poster of "Peace is Always Beautiful" with the name of the writer. But then we're going to reconfigure it as an animation. So here's the first thing. Do I want each word to move separately? Now, I really, really want you to think this through. Peace is an important word. So maybe that deserves attention. The word beautiful is an important word. But what about the word is? Is not an important word. Many languages don't even have the word is. Always, more important. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat these two words as one text block. So please bear with me for a minute. That means they're going to move as a unit. Peace might do peace. But then is always isn't going to be is always, because what the hell? You're never going to see that in kinetic type. Those words are not important enough to waste time on. So they're going to come out together. Is always. So one of the first decisions, all the first decisions are graphic design decisions. Let's do it together. All right, let's make it. I'm making it back into Animate. I'm going to ask everybody to open a new document. File menu, new. We're going to work with the same numbers: 640, 480, 24 frame rate, action script 3. So this whole right side, please be sure. Then click Create. All right, I'd like to introduce the type tool. Can everybody find the type tool on your toolbar? I do believe that would be there in every single workspace. Sure enough. But I'm going to get back to essentials. All right, everyone take the type tool, and I'd like you to join me. This is brand new, and I do want to say many programs use the type tool in a very similar way, especially Adobe products. So doing it a little bit here would help you do it in Photoshop or Illustrator, not so much Premiere. Okay, type tool. I want you to click up here, and I'd like you to write the word peace. Now your first decision is going to be, do you want it in lowercase letters, uppercase letters, or a mix? I'm going with all capital letters. Just write the word peace. The next thing you want to do is change the size and the font. So I'm going to ask you, after you've clicked with the type tool and written the word peace, to switch to this black arrow. You know, guys, I'd like your attention. I'm going to delay for 1 minute. I want to point out a mistake I've seen a lot of people make. So let me just delete mine for a moment. When using the type tool as an animator, try not to do this. Don't drag a box and then type in it, because the box is going to be too large and it's going to get in your way. We want those little text blocks to be shrink wrapped in their little boxes so they're easy to work with. So I'm going to repeat that. The type tool should be clicked when you type, not pressed and dragged. All right. So there you got your first word. All right. To style it, get the black arrow, click on it once, and go to your properties palette. So the black arrow is the selection tool. You click it once and the properties palette. Let's make it larger first. So where it says size, I don't know what size you're at. Say 12, 24, 32, probably something like that. I'd like you to go to the current number and press on it and drag to the right. Just make it large. Now, 96 looks like the limit, but if you ever need to make it bigger, you could double click the number and type in something bigger yourself. The next thing, and by the way, this order is not really critical yet, right? So you made it big so you could see it really. I want you to take a look at the fonts with me. Now guys, I need to stop for a minute and say a few words about fonts. The fonts you're going to see available to you are the same ones that you have available in all your programs. You're going to see the same fonts in Photoshop, the same fonts in Microsoft Word, even. The same fonts all over your computer. Those are the only fonts you can use unless you go out and find new fonts, right? Which we're not going to do. So today we're all using different fonts. Macs are going to come with some, a new Mac's going to come with different ones. Windows is the same, right? Now, we don't have the time, or I'd be tempted to talk about how you find fonts and how you load them on your computer and all that kind of thing. But for now, when you're working on one computer only, it's perfectly safe to use any font. The bigger problem is if you're going to be working around, traveling, working on different computers, then you have to learn how to take fonts with you. All right, let's see what you've got. So what you do is make sure that you have clicked on that text once with the black arrow, and then come over where it says character. I'd like you to join me exactly. If you click on this menu, right, you could scroll up to see what's on top. These are, I don't know what the special designation of these, but they're not that interesting. I'm going to skip all these that start with an underscore. I guess those are the defaults for sans serif and serif, etc. I'm also going to skip over Asian fonts because we're working in English. And I'm going to go to the first font it's willing to show me. Now, instead of just looking through the menu at that point, I'm going to use a shortcut. So, highlight the current font and then switch to your down arrow. And that's on your keyboard. At this stage, you should be able to scroll through fonts quickly to see what they look like. You could always use the up arrow. If you want to go back to a font, please don't use this font. This is on every other garage sale in America. So I want you to find one that interests you. These are very elegant. They're very thin, so I'm not sure if I want to use that for moving type. I'm tempted though. If that's too slow for you, you can, of course, go back to the menu and use these samples on the right to judge. So we're all choosing different fonts now. Give yourself a minute or two to find something that interests you. I'm not going to go with a vampire-looking font or a Cowboys-looking font. None of that fits what I'm after. So I could just look for something bold or crazy, or I could look for something that feels peaceful. That's all up to you right now. All right. So once you've found a font, you might want to notice its name. Okay. We're working hard on the first word just to get used to it. You change the size, and we could change that again. You change the font, and yes, you could change that again too, right? But let's also change the color. I'd like you to do two color operations with me right now before we move forward. I want a different color for the stage, and I want a different color for the type. So let's do both. If you want to color the stage with me so we're not all working on white, use your black arrow and click on the empty stage. Then you'll see this on your right. And find a color you feel like using. So guys, listen, I hope I've made you all feel safe regarding asking me questions. You know, it's a tricky thing, especially in Zoom, to make sure that everyone's feeling good. Uh, I know this isn't that difficult, and a lot of you have done similar things elsewhere, I expect, so far. There's a lot of brand new stuff around the corner. Okay, so you clicked on the stage, you chose your stage color, you could click on your text with the black arrow, and you could choose a new fill color if you like. Of course, if you're using strokes, you could change that too. Okay, since peace is the most important word, I'd like you to find a good location for it. It's going to say peace. Underneath it is always, then beautiful, and then the name of the writer. So I don't want this word to be too far down. All right. Hope you guys are ready for the next step. So the next step may be a little bit easier because it's going to remember the choices you just made. All right, here we go. Let's go back to the type tool. Now I got one warning for you. There's a lot of space in this box that I don't want to have a fight with. So when I get ready to type the next text, I'm going to go a little too far down to keep away from this empty space, which is problematic. I'm just going to go a little extra far down. I'm going to click once, and I'm going to write is always. It turns out the font I chose is an all caps font, so it's not letting me do lowercase. I don't really like that, but I don't want to switch now, so I'm going to keep it, right? Now, it's way too big because it's not nearly as important as the word peace. So what I'm going to do now is this. Once I've typed it, I'm going to go back to the black arrow. If it doesn't look selected, then I'll just click it once. My first big issue is size. So I'm going to click on the current number, press, and drag to the left. I want to mention a graphic design trick. Do you notice how I made the words is always take up the same width as the word peace did? I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying it's crazy common in design. This way, the important words stay important and the lesser words not taking up a mile of space. Also, I get to create a big block out of the whole thing that's easy to handle when all the sentences are there. Now, if you want to change the font, you can. And if you want to change the color, you can. So that's going to be up to you. So again, I could always come back here and find a different font if I think that looks good. I'm going to keep mine simple today and stick with that one font, but I won't always do that. You could change the color, and that might be a good idea. All right. Well, the next word is beautiful. And by now, I think you probably got a little of the hang of this is going to go, right? Once you're done with one text block, notice I'm not calling them words because peace is a whole text block, but is always is a separate text block. It's going to move, it's going to alpha, it's going to do whatever we ask it to do. Together is always. All right, let's get the type tool again and go a little extra far down. You can move it up later just so you don't bump into this other text. And type out beautiful. Please be careful about the spelling on that word. Whenever you make a new text block, you take a few minutes to make your artistic decisions. How big, what font, what color. All right. So I got my black arrow and I'm going to move it into place. And, you know, miraculously, it looks like it's the right size, unless I wanted to exaggerate this word because it's so important. Ooh, I like that. So I think I'm going to do that. I like the font. I like the size. I'm going to switch colors, perhaps. I'm a picky guy. You know, it's funny. I usually like a very kind of tasteful, somewhat refined kind of design style. This is looking like a bumper sticker to me right now, but I'm going to stick with the bumper sticker vibe for a moment. Any questions? If there are no questions, go on and make the part that says Walt Whitman, right? So this is how I'm going to suggest doing that. I go back, get the type tool. I'm clicking beneath all of these some distance because I don't want to accidentally put type in here. And I'm going to type a dash. And I'm going to write Walt Whitman. Now that's huge. So as soon as I write it, I'm going to get the black arrow. Because at least I want to change the size. If it's not selected, I click it once. I'm making that nice and small. I don't want it to get a lot of attention, so I'm changing my color. I want to say something to everybody. We've done no animation yet. Now, this is a trick I learned from a company called Orange Design, who are brilliant. And one of the things Orange Design does really well is when they're making artwork for a client, they're ready for anything. They're like, oh, we could use this for their posters, for their stationery, their envelopes, their animations, their movies, their website. So they have smart ways to design stuff that they could recycle for many purposes. They were the first company that I ever learned from that said, when you're animating, think of the final moment first, because that's where you want everyone to get to when they're going to finally read. Then you sort of work in reverse. How do you get the words there? So what I would like you to do is be sure that you're okay with what you've got before we go start animating. So my words are a little high, so I'm going to take these three with my black arrow and move them down. Do you notice how I did that? The black arrow, I pressed and dragged over them all. And I'm going to just pull them down. And I like that a lot better. Anything you want to move could be moved separately. You could also shift click if you wanted to move more than one thing. All right, this is just to get your final design in order. This is precisely how you're going to do the final project. I'm going to be giving you the choice of quotes tomorrow. All right. So what I want to do next is I want to make each of these separately into a symbol. That's each text block is going to appear as a symbol in the library one at a time. So return to the black arrow and click the word peace. All right. To make a symbol, as we saw in the earlier warm-up, you either right-click or control-click. So click the word peace once, right-click or control-click, and choose Convert to Symbol. Name it after the actual text, peace. It's a graphic type, click OK. You'll see it in the library. Then I want you to make sure you get the next block. If they're overlapping, please be careful. And convert to symbol. Right click or control click. Convert to symbol. Is always. That's a two-word block. Let's go to beautiful and do the same thing. Select it, convert to symbol, and name it after itself. Beautiful. And they're stacking up in my library. And last, we're going to take care of Walt. Click it, convert to symbol, and name it after the writer. I'm on a first name basis. I'm just calling it Walt. I would like you to peek in the library if you haven't already. Usually, it's right next to properties. You got your library, all right? If not, as I said before, they're all under the window menu. You should be seeing 4 items in your library. 1, 2, 3, 4. In a weird way, other than the typography, that's review, right? So you make the artwork. Before you animate, you convert to symbol. These are the rules for classic tweening. It's also the rules for motion tweening, which we're not going to do this semester. So anything that says tweening, well, that's not true, because shape tweening doesn't do it this way. Shape tweening is terrible for text, and so is frame by frame. Frame by frame is not as good for text. All right. So what we have to do next, though, is get these objects on their own layers. Because if I attempt to animate it now, they're all going to move together. If I want each block to move separately, each one deserves a layer of its own. This is new, right? We have not done this before, though we will do it again tomorrow. I'd like for everybody to watch this exactly. Okay, the fastest way to move a bunch of stuff to its own layers is this. Select all 4 objects. So you get your black arrow, press and drag over everything. The program knows that they're all on layer 1. That keyframe just got highlighted. Can't animate them this way. So you highlight them all and join me with this very cool feature. On the menus on top, please go to Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers. This is brand new and I absolutely love it. People who like to draw a lot might do all their drawing in Illustrator, bring all that stuff in to Adobe Animate, and then distribute the parts to layers. Distribute to layers. Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers. So, Jonathan, you become the spokesperson for everybody on Windows sometimes. Is it the same menu for you?
Yes.
Great. Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers. This is on today's handout, but I still appreciate people taking notes. So take a look at your layers. So, you know, what's cool is all those layers were automatically named, which was excellent. It knew what the text said. So it's actually giving you the exact same names as your symbols, which is nice. One of them is empty. Can you find the empty one? So here's the idea. That one with a white keyframe, the artwork was taken off of that layer and distributed to layers of their own, which means the empty layer is obsolete. Let's throw it away. Could you please click on the empty layer? It's got a white keyframe, and click the trash can. Now, if this is not behaving, right, I'd like you to let me know now. If you came late, you're going to have to watch until there's a review. But if you're here on time, you join me on every step, and it didn't work, could you tell me now so I could help you out? Yes, Lorenzo.
When I did the thing you just told us to do, all my words got broken. They broke all the words.
What do they look like?
They look. It's written peace is always, and then EAIL, and then Walt Whitman became Wall Wire.
After you did distribute to layers, that happened?
Yes.
Wow. Could you screen share with me? Give me a second. I need to set something up. I just need to do one little thing. Give me a minute. All right. Lorenzo, would you screen share with me? I think you should be good.
Wait a second. Okay, maybe now. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, I see it. Give me a minute though. Oh, that is really weird. Could you, with your black arrow, could you click on the yellow text for me for a minute? And I would like you to then notice on the right side, it says, on the properties palette, it says graphic symbol instance of beautiful. I don't know why that got messed up like that. Can you go to the library for a minute? And you see the word beautiful in your library. Can you click that once?
Yes.
So that's still saying the correct thing. So I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I'd like you to do is go back to the yellow letters on stage and then press delete. I'd like you to drag the word beautiful right out of the library, put it where you want it, and drag that into place.
Okay.
All right, let's click on the green letters, delete it, and drag Walt out of your library. Okay, you know, and I honestly have no idea what could account for such a strange error. Very, very peculiar. So I just want to check one more thing real quickly before we leave. If you click the word piece for me once, and then click on the properties palette, the tab for the properties palette. So that is a graphic symbol called piece. It really shouldn't change in any way. I think you're good right now, even though I don't know what caused it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Lorenzo, if you stop screen sharing, I'm gonna screen share.
Okay.
Guys, did that happen to anybody else? No? So it was an odd one. I hope it doesn't happen again. We'll see what we can do. I'm glad you asked though, because I would like people to see potential fixes. The whole idea is that stuff in the library is just waiting for you to reuse whenever you need it. So it wasn't a big problem for him. All right. So this is what I'm hoping. Everybody's got the right stuff in the library. They've got something they like the way it looks on stage. They look at the timeline and they understand their own layers. Now, there's one thing about the layers I want to do before we start getting involved with motion today. You know, it doesn't matter what order those layers are in. Right now, mine says, Walt, beautiful is always peace. But I got to tell you something. I get easily confused by stuff like that. So I want to rearrange the layers just so that I don't get confused. And this is what I mean. So I'm going down to the layers and I'm taking the word piece. So I'm just clicking on that layer and I'm dragging it all the way to the top. I'm going to where it says is always, I'm clicking that and I'm bringing it right under piece. And then I'm going to do the same thing with beautiful. Why? Just because it makes more sense to me, right? Just so that I don't get lost later. It kind of matches what I'm seeing on the stage. Honestly, you could forget that. It's not critical, but I like a very neat method. You know, folks, you know, really, even the oldest of you is much younger than me. So your mind might be sharp like a whip, but do you ever forget where your keys are? That used to be a big problem for me. And then I couldn't find my wallet. Then I couldn't find my MetroCard or my BMCC ID. And I'm an artist and I'm very, very busy and I have a lot of material. So I just made systems for everything to be clearer than possible. Everyone was joking me at home. They put away all their autumn coats and I'm like, but where will I keep my keys? That's what I use the jacket for. That's where my keys go in my wallet. So anyway, about reordering the layers, the whole idea is just to keep it simple. All right, guys, we're moving into motion now, right? So I'd like for everybody to follow with me very, very thoroughly. And again, today's exposure, tomorrow's going to be review, right? And the beginning of the final all at once. All right. I want this, I'm guessing, to take about 120 frames. So what I'll do in my own work is I'll make all these layers 120 frames right away. So let's go to the timeline. It's got a little scroll bar at the bottom, and I'm dragging it over to the right till I find 120. And I'd like you to notice that's 5 even seconds, which is nice. It's neat. Doesn't matter much, but it's neat. And then I'm going to go, look at this. I'm on the piece layer. I'm clicking right under 120. F5. F5 just adds time. Doesn't copy any artwork. Doesn't make any big decisions. It just adds time. So I want you to go to each layer and F5 it in 120. And what I'm basically saying is, at the end, I want all the words to be there. Notice Walt Whitman's not there right now. But if I F5 on his layer, he's the same length as the others. I've guaranteed that they'll all be visible for 5 seconds. They got a 5-second lifespan. That's F5, it's not F6. By the way, F6 would have worked, but it would have been sloppy. It would have copied the artwork, new black keyframes there, which isn't a crime, but it's unnecessary. So I want to stick with the cleanest method I could come up with. All right, if you got your 5-second timeline, get your way back to the very beginning, and we're going to start working with separate text blocks. All right, I think what I'd like to do is hide everything but the piece layer. Again, it's not required, but it'll help us focus on the first word. So I'm looking for this I, and if I click the I, they are all hidden. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to click it again. I'm going to is always, and I'm clicking here, and beautiful, and Walt. You really don't have to do that, and I don't always teach it this way. But right now, I'm going to teach it this way to keep us all focused. We're just talking about the word piece. It's the first actor. Okay, everybody, a little bit of information from the company called Orange Design. What we just did was we established the way we want it to look when it's finished. And now we're rethinking the order the actors come on stage. So if you were doing a dinner scene and there were 5 people having dinner, maybe they don't all come to the table at once. The first actor comes out and he waits impatiently. Then the second actor comes out and they go, hey, Sally, hey, Bob, and you move through the story. So this is the first actor. All right, guys, I want you to go to that keyframe and turn on classic tweening. So you go to the keyframe and you turn on the classic tween, create classic tween. You know, it dawns on me now that we should probably just do the other 3 layers while we're at it. Just turn on the tweening. I'm wondering if it'll let us do that while they're hidden. I'm going to try it. So turning on tweening is always from the timeline. You go to the keyframe, control click, and you turn on classic tween. So it's letting us do it even though they're hidden. That's fine. Go to all 4 layers, 1 keyframe at a time, create classic tween. I'm on the last one now. I click the keyframe, hold down control or right click it, create classic tween. They should all be purple. Let me stop for a minute. They're all symbols. They're all in position for the finished moment of the movie. And they all have classic tween turned on. So we're going to focus mostly on motion and maybe some alpha, some transparency. Okay. On the piece layer, this is an odd one, right? So I don't know, if anyone walked out to, I see Andy split for a moment. If anyone had to go wash their face or whatever, I want to say this is very important. All right, so the piece layer is going to take 20 frames to arrive. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to use the word piece as the example. Could you go to frame 20, make sure you're on the correct layer, and F6. You might need your FN key. You might not. That's on you. So I'm clicking right in here on my piece layer, and I am doing F6. Here's the deal. That means piece has got 2 keyframes. The novel idea that Orange Design had was the one on the right is where it stops. You're going to go back to the one on left and move it. So in other words, the one on the right is where the word piece finishes its motion. The one on the left can be moved. Now, if you want to stay close to what I'm doing today, that's fine. If you want to do it a little bit different, that's also okay. I'm going to have that word piece come down from the ceiling. So here's the idea. Be sure you're on the first keyframe, not the second one. The first keyframe Bring the playhead to the first keyframe and then drag the word piece wherever you want it to start to begin. Here's my word by itself. When you show it again, it's coming from above the stage and it comes down. So this is what's going on. It was, Andy, since you participate so much, I'm going to review this just for you.
No, don't do that. I can always catch up. I always catch up anyway. Trust me.
Well, not just for you, for
I'm
everybody.
an avid viewer of the projects.
You're very much a gentleman. And listen, everybody who doesn't have your video on, I'm not leaving you out. I just can't, it's harder for me to mind read when I don't see you. But I'm going to Command Z a few times. If you got it right, just leave it. But it's worth reviewing. So watch with me, okay? Here's what I'm doing. So I'm going to Command Z back here before I moved anything on the piece layer. So we turned the classic tween on for every layer just now. One by one, we control clicked and chose classic tween. Now it's asking me to remove it, which I don't want to do. So they're all purple. I'm focusing on the piece layer now. Now here's going to be the pattern that all the layers are going to share. I'm going to give each of them 20 frames of movement. The second keyframe is the one you made that tells it where to arrive. The first keyframe is going to give you artistic freedom of where the text comes from. So here's what's happening. I went to the piece layer, I went down 20 frames, and I F6'd. The critical idea is do not move it now. This is where it's supposed to get. The trick is you back up to the last keyframe and then move your word. You're basically saying, I don't want you to start in Brooklyn. I want you to start in Queens. But either way, this one's established where it's going. So if you play your animation or just drag your playhead, you'll see. And then it waits. It sits there. All right. I'm ready for the next phrase. Now here's the deal with the next phrase. It's the same idea with one additional step. I don't want that word to be in frame 1 at all. I want it to start in frame 20. So we're going to have to move the keyframe. So if you go to your next layer, the is always layer, I want you to click that keyframe once to select it, just once, and then press and drag it to the right so it starts this live in frame 20. If you missed it, when you want to change a keyframe to a different moment in time, click it once and then drag it over to frame 20. So that object here, I'd like you to turn the, make sure you could see it. I should have said that before. So layer 1 says piece, and then when it reached frame 20, there's as always. All right. So you made sure you could see the layer. Then you click the keyframe once and drag it to the right. Now here's the thing though. I don't really want it to just show up like that. I also want it to slide in, right? And I'm gonna have it slide in from the left. So how do I do it? First, I make sure that this one's got 20 frames apart. It's gonna have bookends. Could you go make sure you're on the correct layer and go 20 frames further and F6. So first you move the keyframe to 20. Then you go 20 frames further and F6. The formula is going to be the same on every layer. Once you've got 2 keyframes, it's always the earlier one you're going to move. So I'm going to go to the earlier one and I'm going to move it here. So now I got 2 layers animating, 1, 2. Guys, listen, I know some of you get this stuff quickly and may prefer less review. Some would like more review, right? And you're both right. I'm going to review that once. So let me Command Z a bunch of times. So this was my is always layer. Before I work on it this time, I'm going to show it to you. So I'm going to poke this little symbol here to make sure it's visible. I don't want that in frame 1 at all. So I'm going to drag it over 20 frames. Then I go 20 frames further and F6 it. Once I see that I've got two bookends for that block, is always, I go to the left one, because it's earlier, and decide where the text should live at the very beginning. The audience isn't going to be able to read it yet. So this keyframe has that text block on the left, but this one has it where we designed earlier. The right side keyframes represent their arrival. We will do this more than once. All right, if that worked for you, it's the same pattern for the next layer. Show your next layer. Go all the way back to the beginning. And here's the idea. I want each layer to begin exactly where the last layer finished. This layer finished frame 40. In other words, it arrived in frame 40. So I'm going to take this new word, drag it over carefully. You click it once, then drag it to frame 40. So they're scattered. Each one starts 20 frames later, and then it takes 20 frames to do what it needs to do. Once this word beautiful is dragged over to frame 40, I'm going to give it 20 frames for a little slide. So I go to frame 60 and F6. So each one looks the same. A little arrow, 20 frames worth. Another one, 20 frames worth. This one now, 20 frames worth. I need to relocate either one. I want to ask you, should I drag it now to a new location? No. It's always the earlier one. So I go to the earlier keyframe and decide where it should come from. I'm going to pull mine over here. So I'm just going to drag it over right off stage. And I want to point something out to you. So what I'm doing is the second keyframe of each layer represents where that object's supposed to get. Let me just zoom back a little bit. So in the first keyframe, it's off stage, but it slides in. This is the one that represents what you designed. So in all cases, the right side keyframe is when the objects arrived. The earlier keyframe is where they're coming from. You could rewind and play it. We're getting close. I want to do the same thing with Walt Whitman. So I'm going with a very even sense of timing. I'm using 20s as the main theme. Each one starts exactly where the last one finished. I think that last one finished in frame 60. So I'm going to take this keyframe, click it once, and drag it over, keeping it on its layer. And it's going to begin on frame 60. This is the beginning of its life. Oh, I keep forgetting to show them. That might be confusing. At this point, all the layers should be visible. So I want to point something out to everybody. Let's say I stopped now. Let's just say, right? What would happen is I'd have the three text blocks slide in their own ways, and the word Walt Whitman is just going to show up when they're done. And there's nothing wrong with that. Have a look at this. Right? The word Walt Whitman didn't slide in. Here it comes again. Right? I don't really like it. And that's why we're making these little 20 frame segments for each word. So let's go over it. I'm going to focus on that last layer. So if you dragged Walt Whitman over to frame 60, here's the idea. Like the other layers, we go 20 frames down to F6 it. Now here's the important concept to get. Each keyframe is a key moment in the life of that object. which in our case is representing where they are. So right now I got frame 80 in the same spot as frame 60, right? Because I copied 60. When I F6'd over here, it just copied it. So they're identical. I do that to ensure that this is the arrival location. Then you always back up to the left and then choose where you want it to come from. I know it's going to get to this spot, so I can move it anywhere I want on frame 60. Here's the way it would look here. But if I don't like that, I could just go back to the earlier keyframe and put it somewhere else. But since frame 80 is in the right place, that's rock solid. That I depend on. I'm only going to move any of these segments in their earlier frame. So I have endless options. Some are stupid. I mean, are not artistic. Like this one here is just going to cross them all. I don't think that looks very good. You know, stupid's a strong word. Goofy, right? I think I'm just going to have it come from here, and let me see if I got away with that. Don't quite like it. I'm going to move mine over a little. All right, now we're going to take this further, right? But I would like to work a little bit with what we have. We better save this. If you have a folder where you like to save stuff, save it there. Otherwise, save it to the desktop for now. So, plain old file menu save. And I'm going to call this kinetic type demo 1. You can call it whatever you want, but this is kinetic type. It's a demonstration. I could put little dashes in here if that helps. Demo 1. And I'm going to write .fla since it's not showing up by itself. It is going to be an FLA though. We'll give it a name, save it, just to keep it safe. I want to add something to this, but you should play yours first. I'd like them to fade in while they slide. So this is a cool option, and you'll see it in kinetic type a lot, right? So it's going to start at 0 alpha. That means all the left side keyframes are going to have an object at 0 alpha. The right side keyframes are already regular visibility, 100%, right? We don't have to worry about the right side keyframes. So let's see how this is going to work. Let's get back to the beginning and find your first keyframe. Now, even if you click the keyframe and look at the properties palette, you're probably not going to see color effects. Even though John pointed out that they're now showing up down here, I found that unreliable. I have to look that over and see what that's all about. So I'm going to do it the traditional way. You could either drag the playhead to your keyframe or click it. They're both okay. But either way, I highly recommend clicking the artwork once. First move the keyframe, then click the artwork. Then you'll see on the right side color effects. Let's choose alpha, and I'm going to set mine to 0. I want to point out that the copy in the next keyframe is still at 100. So since the one on the left is 0, it tweens, it tweens, it tweens up to 100. Very cool. I'm going to do that to all of them. So if you missed it on that one, try the next one with me. The rule's always the same. We're talking about the next text block, is always. So first, find the moment. And that moment is frame 20. That's where is always begins. There's nothing here. So drag the playhead to the beginning of the text block, is always, then click it once and change its alpha. So it's the left side keyframes in all cases, not the right side. The left side. Alpha. And I could change it from 0 or I could leave it at 0. So you'll start to see your own timeline makes a lot of sense. To work on the word beautiful, let's just go right to its first keyframe. To see alpha, click the artwork. and then choose alpha. One could say that you're selecting twice. First, you're selecting in time, then you're selecting the object, then alpha. So this is the time, this is the object, one click, color effects, alpha. I'd like you to do Walt Whitman by yourself. While you're working, just listen with one ear, you know. Let's say this thing was bouncing all over the place, you know, that it wasn't just 2 keyframes. You know, each of these had 20 keyframes. Even the rectangle we did earlier today had 4. You could pick any one of them to change the alpha or change the tint with the same steps. All right, I'm going to finish mine. This is the Walt Whitman layer, and I got the 2 keyframes. This is its arrival, so I'm going to leave that alone. This is where it takes off. So I click the keyframe, then I click the artwork once, and I come over here. I could do tint, but I'm going to stick with alpha. And now I'm going to save my file again. Now, we have 20 minutes left, and I want to go over saving one more time and some exporting stuff, right? But before I go over those 2 things, if anyone has a question about these steps or similar steps, feel free to ask now. And you know what I think I'd like from everybody? Some sign that this is working. You know, one thing I better do is get better at where the emoji thing is, because it does not seem to be on my screen am I not allowed to emoji you guys? I don't have anything up there that says anything like it. I clicked annotate, is that it? Oh, this is not bad. Did you guys just see a check mark from me or no? No? All right. Hey, is this working? If I could see you, just give me a thumbs up. Otherwise, try to give me an emoji thumbs up. Excellent.
It is.
Claps are good too, Omar. Hey, can I ask you guys one more time? You told me once before, and I just couldn't find it. Where are you getting those emojis from? Somebody.
It's on the chat.
It's under the chat feature.
Yeah.
Ah, give me a second.
It's marked as reactions.
Reactions.
You could send your own emojis too.
That's
Also,
cool.
at the bottom of the screen where it says participants chat, share screen, record,
All right.
record as reactions.
The reactions is not showing up for me. Everything else you said is there, but not reactions. So
It costs to be the boss sometimes.
What's that? Yeah, it does. It does. Life in the high tower is lonely, man. All right. Yeah, it's just different for the tour guide. All right, whatever. You're always looking at me, so I'm just going straight up. All right, so it looks like people are pretty positive. Let's take a look at the next steps then. So remember, you know, some people would say, make a change, save a change. And honestly, if you were working for me, oops, what just happened? Oh yeah, now I'm clicking all over the place with this new feature that is not quite working. Give me a moment. Hang on, guys. Holy cow. Are you guys seeing check marks all over the place?
Yeah.
You are, right? Can you guys ignore them? I have no idea what I just did, and I don't want to waste your time on it. So let's move forward. All right. Every time you make a change, you should save a change. So Command S or Control S should just be a habit. Do one thing, Command S, Control S. Some people like auto save. I don't, because it will also save errors. So I don't know. I'm an advocate for Command S or File Menu Save. So here I am back inside, ignoring the goofy check marks, File Menu Save. All right, I want to say something about the final project and how it relates to this one. You'll be getting a series of quotes to choose from. You'll be encouraged to experiment, see if you want to bring some originality to the table. But I'm going to be collecting them as animated GIFs. So if you're an expert in animated GIFs, make one now. I do want to point one quick thing out, I think, before you do it, though. If you look at my timeline, I want you to notice something. The last event was the word Walt falling into place, which it did on frame 80. But you remember when we started, you made the timeline 120 frames long? So that basically means there's 40 frames after the final event. Why? Because otherwise, if it loops, a person never gets a chance to read. It's going to be, life is beautiful, Walt Whitman. Life is beautiful, Walt Whitman. Life is beautiful, Walt Whitman. But I gave it 40 frames just to chill out. And to prove it to you, I'd like for you to either do command return or control return. This is pretty much the way the GIF's going to behave. It waits 40 frames, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, about a second and a half, a little, yeah, about a second and a half long. So for that reason, we could make it loop comfortably if we want. Everything plays, and then it arrives. I could have finished here, but I wanted it to hang out a little bit before it starts over. All right, join me. File menu, export, export animated GIF. I'm hoping everyone remembers how easy this one was. Up here, we definitely don't want transparency on because we all chose a background color, which will disappear. So not much of a motive for that. I'm going to make sure this is unchecked. Transparency is unchecked. If you come down to looping, you get a choice of once or forever. I'm going to stick with forever. It's got a nice pause, and then the viewer could watch it again. If you've got those things set the way you like, transparency is off, looping is up to you, then simply click Save. What it should be doing is asking you what you want to call it and where you want to put it. I like the current name. So it's the current name.gif. I have 3 files now with the same essential name. I got an FLA. I happen to have a SWIFT because we previewed before. And I've got .gif. So all I'm going to do is make sure it's where I want to put it and click Save. I want to minimize animate. I just want to say a word or two about the GIF alone. So I'm going to go to the animate menu itself and choose hide animate. I'm going to put some other stuff away. So I've been a little messy today. I've been saving them to the desktop, which I always regret after I do it. I'm going to search a different way. So here's the new ones, right? And there's the GIF. About previewing GIFs, I want to mention there's a lot of different apps that will probably let you preview GIFs. We're on Windows and Macs in this room, and they're not even the same operating systems necessarily on those. You know, we might have several versions of Windows in this classroom, and same for Mac. But they were always made for the internet. So the most guaranteed way is to get it in a browser. I could even just press and drag it to a browser icon, which I'm a little I'm a little uncoordinated, so I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just going to open up the browser myself. I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to just get it so I can simply drag and drop. Open browser, drag the GIF inside. You should definitely do this when we get to the final to make sure that I receive it. How'd it go?
Good.
Good. Excellent. So guys, listen, I want to just say a little bit about what we just did. The quotes I'll be offering you tomorrow, right? So tomorrow being Tuesday, the quotes I'll be offering you tomorrow are for the final project, which is due Saturday. The quotes will be as small as this one, and some will be 2 or maybe 3 times as long. And the idea is for people to choose something appropriate for their level of energy, to be honest with you, the energy that you want to apply. You know, when I went to art school, I went to School of Visual Arts, I knew I wasn't going to have need for advanced math. So if they had forced me to take math, I would have chosen the easiest math class they could have given me because I needed to save that energy. I'm not insulted if you're taking my class on similar terms. But if you have the need to push the pedal for yourself, or you just want to shoot for an A, let me talk about what an A is. An A is going to have something I didn't expect. You know, maybe your colors are just strangely beautiful, or the fonts you chose do some kind of magic. Or maybe you got brave and you chose, you know, to go like 3 scenes, you know, where life is always beautiful, fades out and it's followed by a whole other quote, you know, 3 quotes. I wouldn't recommend that because it's pretty damn daring, unless you're finding this too easy. That would, you know, really be impressive. I want to show you something real quickly, right? Just to give us a break. I'm going to leave this here for a minute. I want to show you something. I'm going to go to YouTube and I'm going to search kinetic type. Oh, this is a beauty. I've seen this one before. Let's take a look at this together.
How do you make a video that stands out? Would you buy one of these? That wasn't cheap.
Curiosity is a muscle. Use it or lose it. It's something that we consciously have to nurture in ourselves, in our families, classrooms, at work. Sometimes I hear that curiosity and creativity are killed by too many facts.
I want to stop for a minute. So this guy's obviously mixing his kinetic type with imagery. And I know some of you got whopping huge appetites. You're thinking right now, that's what I'm going to do. You could bet that person's been doing this for at least a year, if not many, many years. It says student on it, so probably not many years. Guy won an award for it, though. But he obviously clocked in many hours to be able to pull that off. But it does give you an idea why I chose kinetic type as a final project. It's a big part of multimedia and very appropriate for our intro to multimedia class. Let's watch a little bit more.
But actually the opposite is true. The more you know, the more you want to know. Not only that, but the more you know, the more connections you can make between the different bits of knowledge that you have in your head, and therefore the more ideas you will have, which is why curiosity is really the wellspring of creativity. Technology is replacing routine work, and that's what technology replaces first, and it has done throughout history. So intellectually curious people, people who are capable of learning throughout their career, of asking questions, good questions, of adapting and collaborating with others from different disciplines, people who are capable of really thriving in this world of non-routine work, in other words, are the people that are going to do better.
All right. Oops, let me just pause that. Come on, I'm gonna close that. That's what I'm gonna do. All right, listen, that was just meant as a way to kind of remind you, sort of access all you've seen in your lifetime that involves that kind of use of text. And that could be in any number of environments, advertising probably the most, but not exclusively. In fact, there's a lot of inspiring speakers whose work has been reproduced as kinetic type projects. We will not have time in an intro class to talk about how to use other objects. On the other hand, if any of you felt ultra positive about things we've covered in the last week and want to bravely introduce even color geometric shapes, you can. In fact, I'm going to give you a peek at something just as an idea. Have a look at this. I'm going back to animate for a minute. And I'm looking at the conclusion. And I see the word peace and beautiful are very much featured, right, as I planned. But I'm going to put a new layer underneath peace just for a moment. So I've got this layer here, brand new, untouched. And the word peace starts in frame 1 and comes down. What if I wanted it to meet something on the way? So I'm going to actually, let me just figure this out for a second. I'm going to put a blank keyframe over here for a moment. So this is not really intended for you to join me, just so you get an idea. What I want is when the word peace arrives, that it has a box behind it. And I'm going to choose a color for that box. So right now, it's not what I want. The word peace comes down, and then this word box, this box just appears. And I don't even like the box all that much. So let me just change it a bit. I just moved it up. If I wanted that box to animate, though, I would have to convert it to a symbol like everything else. Thing is, now that I got the right shape, I've decided I wish it started back at the beginning. Well, we learned how to move keyframes. I click a keyframe and I drag it. Is that what I want? Not quite. I want it to move. So I have to turn my classic tween on. I have to tell it where it should stop. F6 it. So now I've got an opportunity to have that box move. It's got a 20 frame gap, just like the word peace had. The left side isn't right. The right side is. I'm going to take that left side and figure out what I want it to do. Maybe it should come from a little lower and alpha while I'm at it. Click it once. Alpha. Guys, excuse me for all these green check marks. I thought I was being clever with Zoom and bumped it to something else. So right now, watch the way these two layers coordinate. I think if I was really going to do that, I'd probably do it for beautiful also. So let me get back to my point. Tomorrow, we'll revisit this. We'll have a chance to try maybe some other variations on it, right? It'll give people ideas of what they'd like to do with their own. I want to say for the record, though, this assignment is easy to pass and hard to ace. You know, for example, even if they didn't tween, but the words just showed up in order, you know, for example, peace is always beautiful, Walt Whitman, right? If it looked pretty good, it would pass. But it, you know, a tween with things moving is going to do better, and one that's beautiful is going to do even better. All art classes are like that, right? Does anybody have any questions for me? Nobody? So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to get our chance to stick with one subject for a while. As you might notice recently, we didn't do a lot of that. We did little frame by frame. Next day, tiny review, new subject, shape tweening. Next time, little shape tweening, bunch of classic tweening. Today we continued classic tweening. Tomorrow we continue classic tweening. And I introduced the final. Wednesday would be an in-class lab. So I think most of you who can would be very wise to try to start that final right away. So Wednesday, there'll be time to ask me questions. I know some of you have to go, so here's the last thought. Thursday, I don't intend to answer questions anymore about the final project. We will have had 3 days for one project by then. Thursday, we're going over P5 programming. Just as a goodbye present, one last thing on the last day, a little introduction to one of the children of JavaScript, and that will be Thursday. And then we say, farewell as a class. If there are no final questions for me, this is your last chance, guys. I am going to stick around for a few minutes. Yes, Lorenzo.
I have some more word problems.
Do you?
Yes.
Wow. So listen, let me say goodbye to everybody. Again, as usual, anyone who wants to stick around is invited. Office hours are never, ever required, right? I'm going to stick around. If you got to go, go. See ya, sent ya. See ya, just waving. And everybody else, I'll see you in the morning. People on YouTube, don't think I don't care just because we never met face to face. I care somehow from the ether. But anyway, I'll see you all one way or the other. Well, you'll see me one way or the other tomorrow. And some of you I will also see. It's not always a two-way street. Goodbye, everybody who's not sticking around. I am going to take a look with Lorenzo right now. Lorenzo, boy, it was that weird last time. I'm glad I saw it for myself. I would have had a hard time believing that the words on stage disappeared on you. I'm a little suspicious of the font you're using, so I want to just throw something at you and anyone else who's listening. I'm sure everyone's heard of a corrupt file. Now, you might have had one, you might have not, but you will at some point. And there's a variety of things that creates a corrupt file. Now, a file is a file gotten sick. It is an ill file. Common causes are these: a blip in your power while you were working, but not enough to turn off the computer, maybe a funky power strip or fuse box or the city. Another popular one is using a bum font. Now that's a weird one. You chose a font, and how in the world could you know there was something wrong with the font? If it came with your computer, it's almost sure to be okay, usually. If you got it off the internet, yeah, there's often a problem. So when I've had corrupt fonts at school, sometimes I literally just change a font on a hunch and the whole file works. That person would be wise to remember that font and delete it. Lorenzo, as a doctor, I would go looking at the font problem, knowing it may not be it. What you've got happening is pretty weird, and seemed to be the only one in the class that had it. Tomorrow, don't use that font. You know what I mean? Use a different font. For today, though, do you want to screen share and show me? We could try to fix it. All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to turn off my screen share.
There's one thing with the letters when it's on animate, and then when you export it as a GIF, it's even different. It's
No
something else.
kidding. I want to see that. So let me turn off my share for a minute. Oh, I did turn off my share. Didn't I? Stop share. There we go. All right, your turn. I'd like to see that.
Can you see my desktop now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is what happens.
This is the GIF.
This is the GIF.
Oh, weird. So,
But when I go to animate,
all right.
it's even different.
Yeah, let me see it in animate. So one thing that's strange is your words are changing in the different keyframes.
When I do this, it's even different.
Well, I feel like the letters are too big, the front size.
That wouldn't do it. You know, I've done a real lot of this, but what might do it is if the keyframes don't match. So I want to do an experiment with you. Lorenzo, on the piece layer, you're on the first keyframe. Could you make sure I could see that layer? Yeah. Could you click the box with the word pieces, that transparent box?
This one.
I mean, on stage.
Oh, this one.
Click that once. Now let's go look at your properties palette for a minute together. Do you see how it says instance of piece? So it says graphic toward the top, and underneath it, it says instance of piece. That's good. Now I want you to go to the timeline and click the second keyframe. That's in frame 20. Click that one in the piece layer. Click right on the black dot though.
Okay.
Right. And now look at your properties palette. Go to the right and click the word object. There's a tab up on top that says object. Now, this is surprising. They both know that they're the same word, right? But, and the way I know that is they both say instance of piece. It's a little confusing. Could you show me your library? If you click on the library tab. So you only have one word piece. Could you click it in the library? Just once? I want to do, does the word piece break on some of those exports, or is it fine?
No, it's fine. It's the other words.
The other words. So let's do the same experiment on is always. Could you click the first keyframe for is always? So that's on the is always layer. No, that's the second one. Frame 20.
Here.
Right? Exactly. Now click on the box on stage and go back to the properties palette. We're studying it. It says instance of is always. That's correct. Now I'd like you to click in keyframe 40. Yeah, okay, you can do that. Click the box on stage once.
Okay.
And it still says instance of is always. This is a crazy glitch. They're both reading the same object from the library, but it doesn't look like they are. Could you go to the library with me? And click on is always. I don't see anything obvious, but what I want you to do in the library, you see the strange icon next to the words is always, just to the left? Double click that. So we just went into symbol editing mode. I want to change the font. So what I'd like for you to do is go to the properties palette now. And the font you're using is Gurmukhi. Click on that.
There. I
Yes.
didn't download it.
Yeah, click that. Just click on the little menu. Yeah, exactly. And choose something else. Just choose something completely different.
Okay.
Why not? Not any of the Gurmukhis.
Okay, so.
All right, let's stay there, right? That looks good too. Let's save it. Could you file menu save? All right, let's get back into the scene. Do you know how to do that?
Wait, maybe.
No, look in the top left. It says is always, and then there's that little arrow exactly. Click that arrow. You're back in the movie, right? I'd like you to make a Swift for me. Can you do command return? Holy cow.
What?
So one thing I can guarantee, this is not your error, right? It's definitely not your error. I want to try something. Could you
Start over.
close that preview, click that little red thing? I want to see if it does it as a video. Let's go to your file menu. Choose export, export video. Next, that one. And let's see, let's just leave this 1 second here. Your settings are already correct. Click export, please.
Okay.
It's opening media encoder like it did the other day for you. That's fine. Let's just let it do its thing for a minute. I don't want to rush it. So listen, I want to talk to you and anybody who's listening right now. I've tested that timeline to my heart's content, and he didn't make a single error, but the exports are. So, and I disqualifying the font right now because, that second font also worked. I mean, I suppose if I was greedy about that theory, I can go a third level. So look, it's doing all the work for you. It just you did a media composer. It just made the movie. Just click OK. Right? You could actually, you're back in animate, it looks like. I'd like you to go to wherever you've been saving stuff today. We're going to find that movie. And I don't see the movie in there. I guess I rushed it a little bit. Maybe it went to yesterday's folder. That was my fault. It looked like it was saving to the right place.
Should I do it again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. One more time.
Okay, so.
File menu export. The part that I didn't look at is where it says output. It looks like you saved it on the desktop in, yeah. Yeah, you could choose today's. You want to choose today's class?
No, I'm just putting on the desktop.
Right. Perfect. Okay.
Here, should I? It's blank. Okay.
No, that's just, it's going to give you it should give you the correct one now. Let's just click export. Let's go to the desktop and have a look. There it is. Let's open that movie.
Okay.
So, yeah, how to open it, it's a good question. It's different on different computers. Let's see what happens if you double click the icon and click the play button. Holy cow. All right, Lorenzo, this is all I got for you right now. I think that I would uninstall Animate and reinstall it.
Okay, I'll do that.
Because I could try a third font, but it just doesn't feel right to me. I could see from your timeline, it's neat. Your library was neat. Frankly, the library, you don't have, if there were 6 extra objects in the library, I'd be like, aha. But no, you did everything right. So at the moment, I'd like to see how this behaves. And if you're still having trouble tomorrow, let me know. We'll come up with some kind of solution.
Okay, because I could do all the work in Animate, but then the words is just random letters.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm going to do? If getting rid of Animate, deinstalling it and reinstalling it doesn't fix it, in your one case, I'm going to accept the FLA for the final.
Oh, okay.
With no points charged, because it's clearly not your fault. There's something up in Animate or in the computer in some way.
Well, I don't use I treat my computer very, very well. I pay a lot of attention to it. I clean it.
I know
every
that.
day.
And recently you just kind of cleaned the whole thing up. I know you moved all that stuff off of it. So it's probably not the computer. There's a very good chance though that it's Adobe Animate.
I'll try that.
Yeah, I often hear positive things about that. So if you could turn off your screen sharing for a minute. I left something out. If you were talking to tech support at Adobe, they'd ask you, save everything, quit, shut down. So they would have actually had you shut down the computer and restart the computer.
Yeah, I was about to say it. It's
Yeah.
like just turn off the computer and turn it back on.
Right. So Omar's right. That wasn't prudent of me. I kind of jumped over the most obvious thing. One thing is, no one ever believes how much that fixes until they've tried it 10 times and realized, well, 6 out of 10 times it fixed it. So
Yeah, because it's reset everything. So
that's it, right? He could have some scrambled RAM in there. In the past, I used
to. Or he's using Mac, so he could force quit it, so you don't need to shut down the computer fully, like Windows does.
That's true. That's true.
So,
that would be step one.
But it's always be on the safe side, just shut down the
Exactly.
computer and
Exactly. Because it could be something else that's going on.
Yeah, and it's Mac. It's gonna turn on like this, not like Windows taking 10 days.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I do want to say this much though about.
Take offense to that.
Yeah, I knew you would, John. I was trying to slide through it, but I just wanted to say though that fragmented RAM or fragmented hard drive is a weird thing, and we used to have to buy defrag software in the old days, and it would look kind of like a bunch of little pixels of different colors, and the reds would be all over the place. You knew it was fragmented. You'd run a defrag and say the colored red boxes would all get lined up, and then all the colors would gather. You'd just unscrambled it. It's sort of like having a hangover, and then you get some sleep and have some aspirin, and you feel fine. You've just defragged your brain. So yeah, all of these things, and some of that just happens by restarting the computer. So I got my fingers crossed for you, Lorenzo. This is a small class. I'll definitely work it out in terms of grades for you. It's not entirely satisfying. Does anybody else have an issue or a comment they'd like to make?
I got 2.
Okay.
So the first one, I submitted there's 2 in that folder for you.
Okay. Do you want me to look?
No. I knew they're there.
All right.
There's 2 things to grade in there. I just thought about it. I was like, hey, you didn't grade that yet.
Yeah, I haven't graded since the 18th was the last time. So that's 11 days. It's really too long. I intended to do it a few days ago, and then I got sick, and I think everybody was like afraid, and now I'm fine. So, and I didn't have any of I didn't have any of the big symptoms, that we're all looking out for. I have my fingers crossed. Feeling pretty good right now. So today, that's my goal for today. Today's going to be a big grading marathon, because I want everyone to have a chance in case something went wrong to resubmit it or whatever. So that's my goal. So if anybody else here is thinking the same thing, I got you something, a redo, or I got it to you late, or just the deadline last Thursday, I got you the video by the deadline. I still haven't graded even the videos. So I expect, if all goes well, to tell you tomorrow morning that everything's current, and everyone will take another look. You had two
And
questions though.
and about the final, is it like it's already on it?
No, tomorrow I'm introducing the final.
All right. So you explain it. I don't do whatever.
Exactly. The steps, the techniques are today's techniques.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's just a few differences, but not a hell of a lot. And, you know, I'm kind of excited about it. I've seen, I got to be honest, very few people have ever failed this final, except for people who just didn't hand it in. But anyone who did it, but there's a big difference between the people who got 70 and the people who get 100. And it often just has to do with, you know, fever, you know.
Creativity.
Yeah, exactly. Creativity. People got pumped. And, you know, it's sometimes as simple as like, wow, those colors made that thing sing. And frankly, that would matter if the person was a professional, or the fonts were elegant. They chose two fonts and they worked together, did some kind of chemical, you know, magic, or any number of things. Often people figure out how to bring photos in on their own. I might just squeeze that in tomorrow for fun. I know some people would like that. By the way, the secret is prepare your JPEG and then in Animate, file menu, import to library. And when you're ready to use it, just make a layer for it. And all the rules are the same as everything else after that. You know, make it a symbol, turn on your tween. But that could often make a big difference. John, I cut you off though. You had another question.
Yeah, so it looks like when you click the keyframe and you go to the color effects instead of the object itself, it sets it up for everything that's in that keyframe. So you can apply a tint frame and then just have that object fade in through alpha or retint in a different color.
You know, so for the record, when it comes to classic tweening, it's a very unfriendly technique if there's two objects in any keyframe. So unless they're turned into one symbol, like we did with is always. So even with a guy with a hat, I could have drawn them separately, but if I save him with the hat, convert him to symbol, you know, guy with hat, that's fine. But if I have two symbols in a keyframe, classic tweening hates that. Just does not like that. And most tweening doesn't like that. Shape tweening doesn't even like that. But, you know, one of the things we noticed today experimenting with that discovery you made, that if you scroll down, you could still find color effects, is that keyframe turned white. It looked different than all the other keyframes. Clearly, Adobe's trying to say, this keyframe's different. And so that's what I'm going to be searching. You know, I'm a little mad at Adobe, really. You know, it's like, I don't really feel that you should release stuff without support. But there's no way to stop them because they don't have any competition. So they're going to do whatever they want. The only thing I could say that's positive is their software does keep improving. The Animate really keeps improving, and it really had to because it was carrying all the stigma that Flash had acquired. You know, Flash had just become so vilified. You know, it was like the enemy of computers, the way everybody saw it. Because, you know, suddenly everybody heard of software for designers, for animators, you know, and articles in the New York Times about what's wrong with Flash. It was ridiculous.
Bye, Professor.
Bye, Marissa. See ya. But yeah, Adobe Animate though has been really very, very popular, and it's just getting more popular because you know, people saw it as new, and at least two crowds been using it. You know, the original people were all web designers, was how I got involved, and you know, many of us became animators when Flash was huge. But in the meantime, broadcast got really into it. People that don't know anything about the web. And it was bizarre how big, you know, not the famous ones that were made in Flash, you know, like Little Bill or South Park, but Family Guy. The only difference with Family Guy was it was made in 2 or 3 programs. And, you know, Flash was one of the 3. And they just mixed it with all this other stuff. But by the end, you look at it, it's really hard to tell how they made it because they were juggling so much. But yeah, anyway, so I mean, I'm a little cranky about that stuff. You know, the minute I loaded it, I was like, okay, my whole class is brand new software that the teacher can't say, oh yeah, this is a glitch in this version, because I didn't know it. So I immediately looked, what's new? You go to Adobe, you search what's new. It listed 5 minor features with no details. Try the same thing on YouTube. You know, with it's going to be people like us posting the first tutorials is what happens. You give it about a month or two. Folks like me mostly, I guess, they put stuff up. You know, how do you use that new feature? The auto keyframe feature. They're making a big deal out of this auto keyframe feature. So I want to see what that actually is. But yeah, Omar, did you have something else to add? Your additions are welcome.
Yeah, it's like, you know, if you got any problem or anything you ask, there's a community on Reddit.
Oh.
They're going to answer any question you have. The best way to communicate and learn anything from Reddit.
And
Yeah.
are you talking about Adobe Animate specifically?
Doesn't matter. Just post something, and there's thousands of people on Reddit just waiting for you, like, to learn more.
You know, I'm glad you said that, because in
like most of my computer software I learned from Reddit.
Really?
People help me out.
You know something? I used to do that not on Reddit, but I used to do it just around the internet a lot. And then to make sure I paid back, I would answer often on the internet, you know, and it's just great that strangers help each other. But I frankly fell for the news about Reddit. You know, there's so often bad news connected to bad.
Yeah, it depends where you want it to be. Yeah,
exactly. So
there's everything have a bad and good, you know. So
that's so true. I think I was looking at it. I fell for a small-minded way of looking at it. I'm glad you say that, because I've not lately. I haven't been sure where to post a question. You know, really, I've made some friends. You know, strangely enough, authors of books will often answer people. So along the way, I've made friends with 1 or 2 people who wrote books on the same subjects I teach. And they're interested because I'm like, oh, I got 100 students doing this thing. I've written Adobe. I had Adobe take on a problem I found. For weeks, they got all into it because no one could figure it out. You know, just give you a clue what it's about. Adobe Animate lets you bring in whole videos, right? And once you bring them in, you could actually tween them. So the whole movie, while it's playing, can move, and all kinds of fancy tricks with it. And what I used to do, I used to program a lot in Flash. So what we do is we'd make buttons that could take you to different movies. So we treat the Flash file as a website. It'd skip around movies, but they would not play correctly when I added buttons to it. And they'd release the whole feature without testing that it only worked if there was one movie. It didn't work right if there was more than one. And to be honest, they never did figure it out. I just stopped using the feature. For a while, it's just like, but that was like a year ago. So who knows what you could do with video now in Adobe Animate. Adobe Animate rocks. I swear, you could use it every day and keep finding new stuff. Really. So I'm very pleased to be sharing it with you. Hey, Johns, you haven't said anything. Are you there?
The other John's my tower.
What's that?
John's PC.
Oh, John's PC. That's your tower?
Yeah.
You see, I don't look at a roll book or anything in here, and I have so many people who just come and go. Ah, John's PC.
That way I can screen share my work.
I was like, gee, John's politically correct? I don't know. How are you doing, Jessica?
Yes, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good, good. You know, I got to say, this class has just been a lot of fun, but, you know, I'm tired. So I'm kind of looking forward to finishing it. I will miss the group, though. You know, we really had an adventure.
Is this the only class you teach at BMCC?
No, I teach Intro to 2D Animation.
Oh, okay.
And historically, I teach it at Friday 9 to 12:40. Friday starting at 9. Historically, and they told me I am teaching it again, but they're still figuring out what the schedules are and whether there's physical classrooms or not. Honestly, I just got an email yesterday, so I could tell you the lowdown. You know what? But you're all welcome to take my class. If anyone signs on for my Intro to 2D Animation class, just be aware it's a difficult class. I give twice as much homework, and the work is challenging. So not everyone passes Intro to 2D, at least not mine. There may be easier ones. And the reason I treat it that way is it's mostly majors. People are not intellectually curious only. They're intending on making a living. So I can't make it light. We got to go deep. But it's great. It's a class I wish I had taken in the past. I'm very proud of it. And that's my other class here. You know, adjuncts at this school, we're only allowed 9 hours a week for various reasons. And so that tops me out. I got 2 4-hour classes, and that's it. But yeah, you're all invited. Any animation majors would probably be wise to take that class. I know there's some very good teachers who also teach it. They teach it very differently. My class, I guess what's biggest difference in my intro to 2D class and the others I've heard about, only the ones I've heard about, I haven't heard about them all, is we don't spend a lot of time drawing, even though we do a lot of character animation. So I give people lots of tips on how to draw digitally, but the subject's always motion. So we cover the same flavors of motion we touched on in this class, but we take them much further, all the way till we can make people walk and talk and blink and look around, as you saw some of the samples. You know, it's a challenge, but it's one worth taking. So, and I have had people that are not majors in there, so I don't know what a person has to say to get in there. I mean, I would think as a multimedia person, it'd probably be easy to get in there, I would think. But I've had students with like completely different majors. It'd be like 1 out of 20 people. I'm like, what did you say to get in this class? And are you sure you want to take it? I don't know. I really don't know. So there's that. Guys, so listen, I'm going to take off, you know, and that went really well. I think tomorrow, you know, I'm hoping people are confident. I'm hoping the quiet people are confident, but if not, we're going to review all the juicy stuff tomorrow in context of the actual final. So that should help people feel much more confident. And then, well, I'm hoping to get them before Saturday. I have expanded my deadline as long as I'm allowed. So like midnight, Saturday night, that's it. That's all I get. Anything after that's a failing grade. So I got my fingers crossed that we could do this right. And it's been going great, so I'm not really worried.
Are the quotes going to be in the on the handout?
Right on the handout. Yeah, and you know, they're all peace quotes. Again, I'm a propagandist. Born in the 60s. I'm a propagandist for peace and diversity and all the good stuff like that. So I take advantage of every single topic and find some way to bring it in a relatable place for this like wonderful diverse culture we have in New York, you know. You heard me talk about it before. I don't think I could live in a place that's not diverse, even if they welcomed me there, you know, reading between the lines there. But even if they let me live there, you know, I've been to some countries where like everybody looks the same and everyone's the same religion and everyone's grandparents live there and their great-great-great-grandparents. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a little hard to like learn about the world.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, before I get off on a tangent, I'll see you all tomorrow. See you guys.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Jessica, see you, Lorenzo.
All right, bro. Take
See you,
it.
Omar. See you guys.
All right, Professor, I'll let you an email after I restart the computer and tell you what happens.
That would be great. That'd be great. I hope that works. All right. All right. I'll see you later then.